Reforger players, what is going on? So, in this video, I'm going to try and keep it nice and short, and I'm going to give you my hints and tips on how to improve as a sniper within Reforger. Now, I've wrote down a list, so let's dive into it. First up, uniform. Very important that we get this right. Now, we don't want to go too bright or too dark, and obviously, we want to pick something that's going to blend in to the environment that you're in. Now, we are going to avoid all this sort of stuff. There are no questions asked when it comes to wearing a red parka jacket as a sniper. You do not do it, alright? So let's scroll across to what I would recommend. Now, the one that I typically use is the G3 battle shirt, the Polish WZ93 Woodland one, and it looks like this. Now, this thing seems to work really well on everyone. However, there is nothing wrong with using the Danish variant, because if it is a brighter day where the sun's out, this may help you blend in some of the fauna that is around. Alright, so mix it up and obviously change certain parts of your uniform depending on the weather. However, the G3 battle shirt by Poland works really well for me. Next up, let's have a look at the MTP top. Now, the MTP isn't too bad, but in the game, it doesn't work as well as it would, let's say, in real life. And obviously, some of the tanned coloured or desert cam variants are not going to work that great either. There is the AOR2. This thing is pretty decent. However, you will start to look more like a Russian, which could cause other sorts of issues here and there. And I have seen people using the frog skin in the past, but for me, it is just that little bit too bright. So let's dive back to the Polish G3 and then move to the trousers. So the trousers, on the first page, we get our 93 Woodland, which looks like this. So we've got that one consistent colour. However, again, there's nothing wrong with breaking yourself up even more and finding something similar to it that just breaks up your person that little bit extra. Now, the game doesn't have that much choice when it comes to uniform. Yes, there are a lot of things, but it's not great for trying to blend into the environment and get that good, proper concealment. Some servers do have ghillie suits, and we will talk about them in a second. However, try and find something that is just going to blend in. Boots, I always use the jungle boots because it gives that clean sort of straight up, all blended in as one. And we move to gloves, and I keep it standard with this. I just use the olive green woodland gloves. Easy. I said woodland, I meant woolen. Right, next up, the helmet. Now, this is a tricky one because if you are doing long-range sniping, you might not want to wear a helmet. You might have that ghillie suit on, etc. However, for me personally, I found that just having a helmet, so I've got access to night vision if the time changes or if I've been in that OP for a long time in the game, then I need access to having night vision capabilities. But before we put our helmet on, we are going to obviously put a balaclava on, and I typically either use the Polish one just to keep it all the same, or I also try the, I believe it's the MC Black, this one here, which is more or less very, very similar to what we are wearing, but we'll keep it all as a one for now, just so we can show you the end result. So, helmet, this is quite a tricky one. Now, I have used this scrimmed helmet in the past and it has worked fairly well, but please remember, depending on what people's graphics settings are, they're not going to see that scrim, they're just going to see a normal helmet from distance. Alright, so does it matter if somebody's up close and they're patrolling around your position? Then yeah, obviously you'd probably want to be wearing a ghillie suit at that point. But if you are engaging enemy or feeding back information at range, it doesn't really make much of a difference. So the helmet that I typically go for is the LBH LB2, this one. If it wants to let me put it on. Fortunately, I've got to take my balaclava off first. There we go. And then we can put the balaclava on underneath. So we've got that sort of consistent colour. Now this is where it gets really difficult. There are a lot of tan coloured rigs and MTP, and then obviously the darker rigs. So which one suits you the best? Now, if we are wearing a ghillie suit, unfortunately, the only one that seems to work really well are the older Alice Commander or Alice Officer rigs. Alright, they're the only ones that seem to actually work with a ghillie suit to a good standard. Alright, yes, it's sort of more traditional webbing, but that's your best option. So, when we're not using a ghillie suit and all that in the game, I tend to use this sort of setup, and I'm just going to grab it really fast. Something similar to this. Nice and light. It doesn't stick out too much. Now, some people are going to say, why? What's the point in wearing plate or a helmet as a sniper? As soon as you fire that first round, you are compromised. And if you've got switched on players, they are just going to return fire in your general direction. And if a stray round does hit you, believe you me, you want some sort of body armor or a helmet, because I have worn a ghillie suit plenty of times on servers, and a stray shot has hit me and completely knocked me out. Done. Alright? So, this is the sort of setup I would be using in terms of plate carrier and chest rig. It's up to you, but I would have something similar to this. Yes, it is a little bit darker, but it's the closest thing to blending into what we're wearing, as well as the environment itself. The MTP one is just a little bit too bright, and it doesn't really go as well. Next up, we have got the day sack. Now, there are a few options with this depending on how much equipment or special equipment that you are carrying. You could obviously wear the Filbert backpack. Now, I know this is a chaotic colour, and if it was in olive green, it would be perfect. However, it does give you a lot of good storage space to take binoculars, smokes, all the extra stuff that you may need. So sometimes I will use this day sack. However, a lot of the time, depending on what I'm doing, I will use the vanilla medical M5 backpack, which is crazy, I know, but it has a really low profile and it seems to blend in a little bit better than anything else on here. Obviously, the combat field pack is pretty decent, more or less a DPM sort of material, but unfortunately, it's very, very large, very sort of prominent, and you will stick out a lot more with this than you would with the medical M5 backpack. Alongside this, we've obviously got the M81 backpack as well, which is closer to what we want. However, it's still just a little bit too big, because you can imagine you in the prone with this. You've got this whole extra area just behind your head, which is going to be sticking out like a sore thumb. So for me personally, I like to keep it like this. Alright. Right. Equipment itself. So we need to make sure we have got a map. Now I typically put my map in the trousers as well as the compass, and then I've got it all organised and I know where it is. Obviously we want to have night vision. So I do not wear my night vision on my helmet all the time. I take it off and I'll put it into either my backpack or my actual chest rig itself. Okay, so we don't want it on top of our helmet because it's just an extra bit of height on us that may give us away. Alright. Next up, we need to get our laser range finders. Now, these are very, very important. Do not forget these. I have done it a couple of times. And make sure you attach it to a quick action key. We can also take some binoculars if we've got the space. This will just help you identify enemy at longer ranges rather than using the LRF or the sight on your rifle itself. I also take a shovel. Now, believe it or not, building up some sort of cover in certain areas works really, really well. Obviously, we want a radio as well, so we can provide that all-important communication, and then we can look through everything else, and that should be just about it. There's no point taking any strobes, because we know the enemy have night vision capabilities, so it's just going to get your position away. Okay, patches, all that sort of stuff, completely up to you if you want to be one of them people, but for me, I don't bother with any of that. Right, next up, medical. Now, I typically take one FFD or bandage, and I'll put one in my UBAC, and then I will put at least 2 or 3 into my day sack as well, so I've got access, and potentially one in the chest rig as well. A tourniquet, obviously very good to have. I have it in my UBAC, and then morphine, I will just carry it in my chest rig itself. Okay, obviously you can take solution, the medical kit, all that sort of good stuff if you're doing medical work, but we want to try and remain as light as possible. So it's all about taking the basics and getting by. Now, anything else isn't really too necessary from this screen. Obviously, sunglasses, I don't really use them in the game. I suppose it could help break up that facial feature a little bit, but I'm not sure how effective the light reflection is on your sunglasses and if it could give you away. Alright, so not for me. If they had a actual cam paint, I'd probably whack that on, but unfortunately we don't have that option. Now, one helmet you could use if you're doing some sort of close range sort of stuff, is the PAS GT helmet. Obviously, it's got the scrim on, but let's be honest, like I've said before, at distance, it's not going to make a difference. People are just going to see the outline of a helmet, depending on what graphics they've got. Alright, next up, let's move on to rifle and weapon systems. Okay, starting it off, obviously, with the main rifle, our primary rifle. Now, the Mark 14 Mod 1 is more of a sharpshooter rifle. Okay, so we want to be avoiding using that. Yes, it's a brilliant rifle, but for me personally, if I'm carrying that, it's within the 12-man teams that we've got in the game, and I'm using it as a sharpshooter rather than a long-range engagement tool. So we've got three other choices. We've got the G28, obviously the Intervention, and my favourite, the M40A5. Now, if we're setting up a OP and we're just watching the enemy and potentially going to engage when one of our friendly elements moves in, I would most likely I'd be using the M40. It's nice, it's accurate, but more importantly, it's a lot harder to find somebody using this than it is something like the Intervention or the G28. Now, I say that because the G28, you will get trigger happy with it. You will start firing a couple of follow-off rounds or follow-up rounds just to make sure that individual is down. Whereas with the M40, because it's a bolt-action rifle, we don't really have that luxury. Now, if I was using the Intervention, my main aim would be to deny or destroy enemy medium and soft-skinned vehicles. Yes, you can engage enemy combatants such as infantry with this. However, even with a suppressor on, it's pretty prominent, pretty loud, and it will give you position away. And the sad bit about it is we only have it in this tan colour. And look how big this thing is on your back. Alright, you are going to stick out like a sore thumb with this rifle. It is a brilliant rifle, however, it's got a more sort of design purpose of destroying soft and medium vehicle assets. So let's remove that for now, and also have a look at the G28. Now, this thing is a brilliant rifle. You've seen me using it in my videos. It's semi-automatic, and it really will stop the enemy. It's 7.62, and it is a big hitter. The only downside about this rifle is you will fire off more rounds than you need to. It just happens. You can't help it, and you'll try and take on shots that are perhaps not viable at the time. Okay, you've got to weigh up that risk factor in the game. Will you give you position away, etc. The one big thing about this is, though, is if you have a close range engagement and you get found, you have that red dot sight on the top, which will really help you out in that situation. So it does have a place. You just have to work out what you're going to be doing and how you're going to be doing it. Now, let's remove that for now. Move to my favourite, the M40. And I'm going to actually get myself a few magazines. And talking about ammunition, let's look into it. So, tracer ammunition, absolutely not. We do not want to give our position away, and tracers in the game, it is very easy to see. Alright, FMJ is pretty decent, and it has got good stopping power, but the best one I go for, the one most people go for, is armor penetration. Okay, so the AP ammo, because it gives you a lot more flexibility when engaging people or engaging soft-skin vehicles, depending on what rifle you are actually using at the time. Next up, attachments. Now, if you are a complete and utter pest, you can obviously get an extra sight that is more fitting to what you do and something that you actually enjoy rather than the default sight on the rifle itself. But the main thing for me is getting that suppressor and getting it on the rifle. And for the M40, it is the Foxtrot Alpha 762 Sierra Sierra suppressor. Okay, so the FA762 SS suppressor. Alright, so we want that suppressor. Now, a suppressor is not a silencer, but what a suppressor will do really well is help you not be located as easily when you've fired your rounds or you're engaging the enemy. They won't be able to exactly identify where it's coming from. Whereas if you've not got a suppressor on, it's far easier and far quicker to identify where that shot came from. So it's definitely worth having a suppressor on the rifle. Okay. So, pistol. Now, some people will say, well, what's the point in taking a pistol? I never take a pistol. I always take a pistol. Now, for me personally, I either take the Glock 17 Gen 5 or the Glock 45 Gen 5. It is up to you, and again, the pistol is more or less preference, but I do take one just in case we get into a close range contact, and we need to use it pretty quick. And I only take 2 magazines in my actual pouches, and obviously 1 magazine in the pistol itself. Next up, so pyrotechnics. Now, yes, you could take a couple of fragmentation grenades, but I wouldn't say it's too necessary. One thing I would say is necessary is at least 2 normal smokes. I'd take 1 green and 1 red, and that is purely to mark enemy positions if you have to break contact. Red for marking the position to call in CAS, and green if you need an airlift is always useful, because I've been out on the game, out somewhere random, I've given them an accurate grid reference, they haven't been able to locate it, so I popped a green smoke and they found me. So yeah, pretty good to have. Now, depending on what sort of sniping you're doing, if I had my G28 loadout, I would actually take some DEMS charges as well as the blasting machine, and that is only because if I'm going around the map doing that sort of stuff, I'm going to also look for enemy vehicles that I can deny on the ground. It's always just useful to have, and it can be used as a deception tool or a distraction if you need to get away. So what I'm saying is, you can plant that somewhere, put a timer on it of like 30 seconds, a minute, break contact, and when that goes off, that is going to completely throw off the enemy from where you've gone, as long as you've correctly bugged out and they haven't actually just watched you on where you've gone. Okay, so it is a good tool to have, just in case you want to create that sort of deception. Okay, next up, knowing your map. Alright, now yes, you're going to get experience the more you play certain maps. Okay, and you're going to know about key positions, but we need to understand the basics of sort of map reading, so we can give out good communication and help to identify enemy positions a lot easier. So if we look at Reed Pond, obviously we've got our northings and eastings at the top, along the side here. Alright, and the grid reference for that, we just look up along the corridor, so 065, and then up the stairs, 055. Okay, so 065, 055. Now that is a 6-figure grid reference. We're not going to dive into too much nav, but you can also give some pretty accurate 8-figure grid references if you do it right and start to learn how to use the actual protractor in the game. But we're not going to dive into that today. Now, we also have contour lines along the map, and they look just like this little line here. And this shows how elevation starts to be created. Okay, so we can work out if a position is a high feature or it isn't. Now, what I'm going to do is try and find one of the higher features on the map, which is sort of like over here. And as you can see, we've got loads of contour lines all really close to each other, which shows to me that it is really steep. Okay, it is a very steep incline. Okay, obviously the wider apart they are, the less steep the incline. Alright, so it's always good to know that sort of basic stuff so we can give good information to our friendly forces out on the ground. Okay, now if we move out of the map, we will get our compass. So as you can see, bog standard compass, a good old prismatic compass. Now we have north, east, south and west. Alright, never eat shredded wheat. Okay, however, we do also have some very basic bearings on the map as well, and it is pretty useful. So let's say we have got an enemy, I don't know, at bearing, one of our friendlies calls it out and says something like, we've got an enemy southwest bearing 236. What we can do is, if we haven't got the bottom little overlay that we've got on the server, we can also right click onto here and start to really identify that position, especially because we're just setting up an OP or something like that, and we can use it like this. Obviously we're going to want to know a distance as well, but right click with your prismatic and it will show you that bearing. So very, very useful to have. And just make sure to take your time, do not rush trying to get your head around the map reading side of things. But just remember, you've got your northings and your eastings on your grid references at the actual top. Okay, so like I said, 077, 047 is this position here. If we zoom out, we've then got a 4-figure grid, okay, which is not as accurate. Now, one thing I am going to show you just for your awareness, as we have zoomed out and we've got the 4-figure sort of area opened up to us, okay, the larger grid square here, they are a K along and a K upwards, okay. However, from corner to corner, that is 1.5 kilometers. Alright, so it's just good to know. And if we move, like, you can see the actual box here. Alright? But useful information to have. The big one I would say learn from this is just learning the actual key positions that you want to get to, see if it's achievable. Alright, we've got all the contour lines and all that sort of stuff. As long as you learn about them and understand them, then it will help you out in the long run. But knowing your map and having a good look at your map before you move to an OP or an objective is very, very important. Understand the position, understand your route, make sure it's the safest, make sure it's the most concealed, and you're avoiding being detected as you make your insertion onto the site. Okay, the big one, concealment versus cover. Some people still get confused with this, so we'll quickly go through it. Now, concealment is cover essentially from view. You can't be spotted, so like me being in this sort of low ground, hidden away. However, if someone was to fire at me, it's not going to protect me from the rounds that are coming in. I am concealed, but I am not covered. Okay? Cover is something like this rock here. Alright, so we have got that good cover from view. We can't really engage the enemy from here, but we know that if the enemy engage us, we are protected by this sort of rock surface, sandbags, whatever it is. Alright, that is our cover. Alright, and we can obviously use trees and all that sort of good stuff, and we can fire from behind cover if we need to, but just bear in mind some places unfortunately in the game are very, very obvious. Concealment isn't great, and I'm going to show you why. So obviously if I look to my rear here, we can see all this fauna, all these bushes, trees, the grass, etc. However, if we move out here and let's say I sight in towards this objective, can you see how we start to lose a lot of that key detail? So if there was an individual just sat out here, we would definitely pick them up. However, if that same individual was over there somewhere, we may not be able to identify them as fast. So depending on people's graphics, you need to be very careful how you actually implement use of concealment. Now, one thing that I like to do, and I'm going to show you it really, really fast, okay, is to help mitigate certain factors. We can actually get our shovel, put it into our hand, and we can build certain things. So I always tend to look, say we're looking out over the farm here, and this isn't my normal area, but I'll find somewhere really quick. Yeah, this is a very exposed area. So you never want to be, just a little hot tip while we run into a position. If you're watching farm, never be in that closest woodblock, because that is the most obvious position, and they're always going to have a check there first. Going to be in this sort of woodblock that is just slightly further to the southwest. Now there is a position that I tend to use, and it's where all these dense trees are, and it works quite well. It's also got a rock near it, which is the one just here. So what we can do is actually, if it's safe to do so, obviously, is build up certain elements that will help us remain concealed. Now obviously this is a hard foundation, so if someone zooms in on this, yes they are going to see it, but they might not see what's next to it because it may just blend in. Obviously if you're just sat on some grass, you are that hard object that they're going to ping straight away. As easy as that. So we're going to dig this position. I'm not going to dig it fully or as well as I normally would do, but this is the position here, and then what I always do is dig one to the rear as well, and in this case we're going to put it here, and this will help you remain concealed from potential enemy patrols because not everyone knows what these look like. However, again, make sure you build it fairly naturally as best you can. If you're placing a few of these around, don't do it just like a box or something like that. You need to try and make it look like part of the environment. So be careful doing it, but I've had a lot of good success using this. Some people will argue against it, but for me personally, it's worked very well. So if I go to this position here, okay, and what we're going to do is set up here, like, yeah, cool, and we want to move back a little bit. We don't want to get that sort of higher area, so let's just go for this. Now I've got that cover from my right, and I've also got the cover from my rear, and if any players come around here, they're probably not going to spot me as they're moving through this woodblock. I've got fairly decent arcs onto the side. Now, what I'm going to do, out of interest, is I'm going to spawn an AI. All I'm going to do is take control, and we're going to see if I can actually spot myself. Alright, so what I'm going to put down is a sharpshooter squad, just like that. Okay, and then we're going to take control of one of these. Let's see if we can actually identify me as easy as we normally would. Hopefully they've actually got some sort of binos or something like that. Binos do obviously zoom in far better than anything else. However, yeah. So there we go. Now you can see that hard cover. Now, due to the lighting, probably do stick out a little bit more than I'd like there, but it definitely makes us a much harder position to spot, because people, when they've taken sniper rounds, they're not going to straight away know where it's come from. They're going to start scanning, so just moving around like this, having a look. And if we're moving around like that, as you can see, we've already missed us at this point. So it's a lot harder to spot. And what I'll do is take control of the actual sharpshooter with the rifle, just to show the difference with that. As you can see, if we're scanning like this, see we are a lot harder to actually find. In fact, I would argue that I can't even spot myself there, which is pretty impressive. So I believe we are actually around that sort of area, but as you can see, if they've got the SVD from here, they're not going to be able to actually spot us. So our little bit of cover that we built up, it does look daft, but it actually does work just a little bit. I've just sort of spotted myself there. Obviously with better sights, so zoom-based sights, optical zoom sights, they're probably going to spot you a lot quicker. But it does just help you, and it mitigates that risk factor just a little bit. And obviously it depends how you position yourself when you've gone prone. Alright, the next one, the fun one, which you all love doing, I'm sure, okay, is radio. So we're going to make sure we set ourselves to the platoon channel. Now, if you're working with a spotter, they should be right next to you, so there's no need for team-based communication on the net. So we're going to switch to the platoon level net. Now, from there, all we're going to do is, if we are spotting enemy positions, we are going to scan the area. Now, we're not always going to do this with our rifle. If we've got a spotter, obviously they can use their binos or the rangefinders to identify enemy positions. However, if you are working solo, I often just make sure I'm really well concealed, don't fire a round off, etc. And all I'll do is use my LRFs or binos to locate enemy positions. Now, when we're doing this, okay, we want to identify key assets. So in this case, I've put down an enemy APC. Okay, I've also put down an enemy helo and a transport vehicle. So all I would do on comms is just keep it nice and clean. Nothing, no like voice procedure or anything like that, because not many people will understand it. And all you need to do is say something like, "Be advised, enemy APC has been spotted on the southwest side of the farm. Grid to follow." Then you can jump into your map and you can either give an accurate grid marker using an 8-figure, or even better, just to make it simple for people, go into the map, right click, go to here, click red, just find any old one, because people are not going to understand what a lot of these are anyway. And all you need to do is right here put enemy APC, enter and place. Job done. Now the rest of the team knows that there's an enemy APC there. Obviously, you can give more information than that if you want to, and I would definitely recommend certain things. So for me, if I'm looking at this position now, and let's say this is live, I would say, "Be advised, enemy APC located on the southwest side of farm next to the large white barn. Be advised, enemy APC is facing its main turret out towards the southeast." I say again, enemy APC is facing its main turret out towards the southeast. Okay, as simple as that. And we do the same for anti-air assets if they've got that on the ground, and obviously we potentially engage them before a cast run, all that sort of good stuff. And it's just about identifying them key features, such as this vehicle here. "Be advised, enemy transport vehicle has been located on the southeast side of the white building on objective farm." Alright, and vice versa for the helo. Just make your team aware, use the map to mark positions, and provide that information update as often as you can, but keep the net nice and clean. So enemy infantry, we can do the same. All we would do with this is take our time. So we've got one here, we've got one there, and let's just sort of pretend we've got 2 or 3 around the HQ building. All I would do then is something along the lines of, look at my map, if I saw a friendly team moving into the objective or preparing to move onto the objective, or I got comms that we were about to engage the objective and move in, I would say something along the lines of, be advised, I have spotted approximately 5 enemy on objective farm. That is 5 enemy on objective farm. Okay, and that just gives them information of the enemy state on the actual objective. You can also obviously give direction and key markers on the map. Okay, so we've set up our OP. We've dug in really well, we're concealed, we haven't been spotted, everything is going well, and we're all set. What I'm going to do is get my laser rangefinders out, and I'm going to start identifying distances to potential engagement areas. So all I'm going to do is pull them out, click and hold R, and wait for that distance to pop up, and obviously it is in meters. Okay, nice and simple. I'm just ranging in where I could likely engage enemy, and I'm going to do it across different points, all that sort of stuff. As easy as that. If we are just overlooking an objective and our team controls it, we need to find likely enemy assault positions. Okay, in this case it would be, let's say, to the northeast of farm, up in that woodblock, and I'm just going to range in there just in case we have enemy moving from that position, so I know my range is straight away and I can zero in. Moving on to zero in, all we need to do is jump into our site, and you'll see it on the right side, and all we're going to do is click page up to increase our zeroing, or page down to decrease it. Now obviously that is a little above 500 meters, we can't accurately zero to that, so what we're going to do is keep it at 500 and then just make the adjustment when we make the shot, if that makes sense. So let's say I'm shooting at the tire, and that is 500 and, let's just say 530 meters. Obviously I'm going to aim just slightly above so the round drops nicely onto it. Okay, so we make quick adjustments by doing that. Pretty straightforward. Right, so when would you want to engage from a position like this? Now, the only time ideally or realistically you want to engage is when something else is happening, i.e. we have got friendlies moving in on the objective. Now, the reason I say that is you are then providing that Overwatch and fire support asset, rather than just giving information and not really doing much. And let's be honest, you picked up a sniper rifle because you want to drop people at distance. And what we're going to do is take our time. You don't need to always engage moving targets. Players in this game will often stop, stand still, pick up something from the armory. That's why you need to identify these positions. It makes your life a lot easier. And all we're going to do is make sure we're ranged in, take our time, and obviously we know that that's 530-ish to the actual building, so we should be bang on like that. Okay, now headshots versus center of mass. Me personally, I will always aim for center of mass, because a round into the center of mass will drop the target, and by center of mass I mean the torso area. If you want to be some Gucci assassin who's getting headshots, dig out, but for me it's a lot safer and you're a lot more guaranteed to kill that enemy if you aim for center of mass. Now in this case we have engaged two individuals, we have dropped them both. We can obviously let the team know, so we could say something along the lines of, team moving into objective farm, be advised I have engaged and killed 2 times enemy on the southwest side of the farm, however you still have movement on the northeast. I would then look to reposition myself. Okay, so with reposition, and we're going to pull back. We're not just going to run sideways through that area, we're going to pull back, nice little relax, keep moving, using any hard cover we can to move. Okay, and then when we find a different firing position, all we're going to do is rinse and repeat. You're not always going to be able to take a prone shot, so please practice taking kneeling shots as well as potentially standing shots as well. Now when it comes to close air support and all that really good stuff, okay, we're not going to dive into the actual full-on calling in a cast, calling in a fire mission. All I would say on a public server is something along the lines of, friendly cast, be advised, enemy APC spotted on the southwest side of objective farm. APC is currently facing towards the southeast with his turret. Advise attack route from the northwest. to the southeast, from the northwest to the southeast. Something like that. Okay, so you're giving him an attack route onto the objective, which is safe. Obviously, we wouldn't want him flying from the southeast because that turret on the APC may engage him. So it's much safer for him to fly from the northwest. But something along those lines, and you could even say something like recommend using Hellfire, recommend using missiles. Just keep it simple, basic, because not everyone's going to understand something a lot more complicated. Okay? And that just about wraps it up. There is one big thing that I am going to say, or two last things. Elevation is always great to have if you can have it. But don't always think you need an elevated position to be effective. You don't, okay? The biggest thing that a sniper can do on the game is provide intelligence and information of what is happening on that objective, and then when a team moves in, move into that fire support role and engage key targets. Like I said earlier, if there was an AA on that position and we had friendly teammates moving in as well as a friendly CAS, my main aim would be to take down and deny that AA getting used. Alright, nice and simple. And lastly, just practice. Just practice. Okay, you don't need to rush anything. Move slow. Take your time. Alright? Try and go on foot if you can. Use vehicles as a last resort to get somewhere fast. But always ditch the vehicle a good distance away from where you're going to be operating in. And that is about it. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. I will see you in the next one. Please comment. Let me know what you thought about this one. And I'll try and get some more advanced stuff out later down the line. Anyway, I will see you in the next one.